Born and educated in India, he came to the U.S. in 1970 for his medical residency. By 1981, he had become a leader in the transcendental meditation movement, which led to his understanding of the mind-body connection. In recent years, his works have moved more into the realm of spirituality. While not without his critics, he continues to gain followers who look to him for answers on everything from nutrition to the afterlife. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with best-selling author and spiritual leader, Deepak Chopra. What's the difference between enlightenment and education?
Education is knowledge and information. Enlightenment is a shift in your awareness that totally changes the way you see yourself and the way you see the world. It's a shift in your identity more than anything else. So you go from your ego identity, your skin-encapsulated personality, to an identity where you have an experience of consciousness where you're inseparably one with all that exists.
In the Christian tradition, they talk about being born again.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enlightenment?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is being born again because you have the death of the old self. There's a psychological death of the ego identity and then being born in a divine identity when Jesus says, I and the Father are one.
Did you always have an interest in all of this, or was there a point where suddenly you wanted to know more?
Actually, I started off as a doctor, and I still am, and I realized at a certain point that there was such a thing as healing, and there suddenly occurred to me that the word healing and the word holy are the same word, that healing, health, holy, they all mean the return of the memory of wholeness and the return of the memory of who you really are. And when you have that experience, you lose all fear, including the fear of death, because you're in touch with that part of yourself, which is beyond space and time. It's timeless.
Do you fear death?
No, I don't fear
Really? Not on any level?
Not on any level. I think about it,
yeah.
And that's one of the ways to lose your fear of death is to meditate on the experience of death. And so I do that.
Take me back and tell me a little bit about your childhood. How did it all start for you?
I was the son of an army doctor who worked in the British Army. He was a cardiologist. My parents were very spiritual, but not, any strict denomination or not into rituals. They were spiritual in a secular sense. We were just two children, me and my brother. My brother now is the Dean of Education at Harvard Medical School. And we went to a Catholic school which was run by Irish Christian missionaries. My friends were from all kinds of places, denominations, Parsis, Zoroastrians, Jews, Muslims, Sufis, Hindus, Buddhists, and of course lots of Christians because we went to a Catholic school. We were very much into sports and, cricket was our favorite game. And I was a bit of an athlete. And I was very interested always in comparative religion because of all my friends and had a very celebrative idea of religions because we would all go to each other's festivals and there was lots of music and song and celebration and joy and ritual. So my idea of religion was it's something that you actually enjoy, you have a good experience with. Later I got very interested in English literature through my introduction to Shakespeare and Chaucer and other English poets like Shelley and Tennyson and many others. And I wanted to actually go into journalism, but my father wanted me to be a doctor, so he gave me these wonderful novels where the protagonist in every novel was a physician. So, I thought, wow, this is exciting. So I went into medicine. I came to this country after I graduated. I took training in internal medicine and endocrinology.
Let me hold you right there and ask about when you came to this country, what was your interpretation, your impression of America when you found it?
I was seduced by it, totally. I was seduced by the glamour of it, the material success of everything, how easy it was to acquire things. The first time I went to a television store, I didn't have any money, but the fellow asked me, the salesman, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a doctor." He said, "Oh, you can just sign a piece of paper and take it." And the next day I went to an automobile store and, a dealership, and I walked out with a car by signing a piece of paper. So for me, this was a very seductive society where there was instant gratification. I later realized, of course, that what we were seduced into doing was spending money that we hadn't earned to buy things that we didn't need, to impress people that we didn't like, and then had lots of stress and wondered what was going on.
Yeah. When you talk about, though, coming to America, and I think coming from where you came from, and I might be wrong in my concept of this, but I would think that there was a more spiritual culture. And you come to America, did you notice, did you feel a difference in that? Did you think, just even not studying that yet, did you feel the difference?
I felt the difference. India has a very spiritual culture, but it's becoming very materialistic right now. It's becoming as bad as the Western culture in that way. And I think they still have to go through their learning process. So, stress is becoming a huge factor in successful Indians. They're getting heart attacks. They're falling prey to all the illnesses of modern society. But yes, when I was growing up, India was a very spiritual environment, and the contrast was huge. But I have to be honest, I loved it. I mean, I loved the glamour, the success, the easy ability to acquire things. It was only later when, as a physician, I was dealing with human suffering that I realized that, I had become a superb technician who knew everything about the human body and a lousy healer because I knew nothing about the human spirit.
Can someone be a successful doctor and leave all of the healing out of it?
Yes, because a lot of medicine these days is based on technology, which is very effective, okay? So if you have an acute appendicitis, you don't need to see a healer. If you break your leg, you need to see an orthopedic surgeon. You have pneumonia, you should get an antibiotic. But then when you go beyond that, you have to deal with human suffering is much more than this. Human suffering includes fear of getting old, fear of disease, fear of death, and also human suffering leads to chronic illnesses through addictive behaviors. So, we are a very addicted society. We're addicted to adrenaline, we're addicted to outcome, we're addicted to stress, we're addicted to toxic relationships, we're addicted to toxic substances. And this is something that no medicine can cure. No amount of doctoring can cure. You have to go to a deeper level and understand the existential dilemmas that we have as human beings.
The shift from the medical to the spiritual in your own life, how did that happen? And how were people reacting to you as it happened?
Well, first of all, the reason it happened was two things. Number one, my training was in a field called neuroendocrinology, which was the study of brain chemistry. And when I was training, we were actually in a very exciting time because we were discovering the molecules of emotion. So I could see the connection between consciousness of the human spirit, the mind, and its biological responses. There was a theoretical basis for looking at this. The second thing that I was puzzled by was that you could have two patients who had the same illness, who saw the same doctor, who took the same treatment, and could have completely different outcomes. So, this person could recover and this person could die. And so what was going on? There was something we were missing. So I started to connect between what I knew theoretically and what I was observing in my patients. And at the same time, because of my training in science, I started to try and give science explanation to the spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And in the last 3-4 decades, we've come a long way. We really do have an understanding of how spiritual experience heals. I mean, I can give you an explanation for that now, which wasn't the case 30 years ago.
So is there really a heaven? Is there an afterlife? Is there a spiritual life outside of the physical we have here, or does it all just live in our minds?
There is only one reality, and that reality is consciousness or spirit, whatever you want to call it, or the life force or intelligence. That then projects itself, localizes itself, as this experience that we're having right now. So without consciousness, you and I wouldn't be able to have this conversation. Okay? Without consciousness, we couldn't see, touch, taste, or smell, and yet we cannot see consciousness, and yet this invisible force is what is allowing us to see, to doing the seeing, to doing the hearing. So consciousness is the basis of everything that we call reality. And this particular physical reality is a manifestation of our consciousness through this human nervous system.
Okay.
But consciousness by itself is timeless and exists outside of space and time. Let me give you an analogy. People are watching us right now on their television screens, and they're not naive enough to think that we are inside their television boxes. If their television set got destroyed, you and I would still be here. So when the human nervous system in the body is destroyed, consciousness still exists because it is non-local, but the instrument through which it is expressing is not working anymore. So consciousness has to incubate so it can find a new instrument. And I'm making this more complicated than it sounds, but actually the scientific aspects of consciousness interest me. You know, from the wisdom tradition I come from, everything, heaven, hell, purgatory, this world, the afterlife, the in-between life, these are all projections of consciousness. So, you know, heaven is upgrading the illusion, hell is downgrading the illusion, and this is also the illusion, because this is a projection of something that is permanent, eternal, outside of space-time.
So why is my consciousness and your consciousness the same then?
It is one consciousness that differentiates into several consciousness. So, you know, there's an ocean of consciousness and all these ripples and waves and tides. There are different behaviors of the one consciousness, and they're also inseparably connected with each other.
Is that what we refer to as the spirit?
Yes, the spirit and the Christian traditions, Holy Ghost, whatever you want to call it. It's the infinite ocean of consciousness that is manifesting as life in different ways. But at the deepest level, they're all connected.
Is there a God?
Not as a dead white male in the sky. You know,
He's not sitting on a cloud up there.
He's not sitting on a cloud. You know, you've probably heard the joke when the astronauts came back first time from space. Somebody said, "So did you see God?" And the astronaut said, "Yes." And said, "So what's the experience?" And he said, "She's black." You know, the point is we have these concepts of God that are so rigidly entrenched in culture, in imagination. The moment you define God and the moment you have an image of God, then that's not God, because you've limited God. You know, you've defined God, you've limited, and God by definition is infinite. So you cannot have an image, and that's why the Jews don't even have a name for God. You know, they don't write it down, because they consider that if you write down the name of God, then you've given it an appearance. God is the invisible, literally the invisible intelligence that orchestrates all the activity of the universe simultaneously. You know, your body has 100 trillion cells right now in that body. That's more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Each cell is doing 100,000 activities per second. And each cell is instantly coordinating, synchronizing its activity with every other cell without sending messages of information or energy. We call this non-local correlation today in the scientific worldview, for those who are interested in this. How does a human body think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, and make a baby all at once? And while it's doing that, it tracks the movement of stars and planets, because your biological rhythms are the symphony of the whole universe. There's an intelligence there. Now, we can call it consciousness, we can call it the inner genius, we can call it the soul, we can call it the spirit. Those are words that come from different traditions. But the fact that the energy and information of the universe is being orchestrated by an infinite intelligence, the evidence is overwhelming.
Who were Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad? Who were these people, and were they all teaching us the same thing?
Yes, at the deepest level, all great teachers that you mentioned were teaching the same thing. These were human beings who had realized what we can call God consciousness or universal consciousness. So they had actually expanded their awareness, where they no longer identified with this person. When Jesus, in one of his passages, he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." When Abraham asked God, "What's your name?" God says, "I am that I am." So right now, you say, if I ask you, "Who are you?" you say, "I'm Ernie." Okay, you ask somebody else, "Who are you?" they say, "I'm Tom or Dick or Harry or whatever." They have taken the I am, and then they've squeezed it in the volume of a body in the span of a lifetime, given it an artificial identity, and said, "This is me." But that person that I'm sitting with right now was a different person 20 years ago. Different body, different mind, different emotions, actually a different identity, even a different personality. The fact that there's continuity is because of memory, and it's an artificial thing. This person is not the baby that was born, say, several decades ago. So what we call a person is a pattern of behavior of the universal consciousness that is constantly kind of transforming and changing. And if you take a picture of you as a baby and if you take a picture of you now, hardly any resemblance. There's not the same person. So these people had transcended that. They experienced their inseparability with the whole universe, and as a result of that, they felt infinite love, compassion, understanding.
If these people had that, why have their followers ended up clashing? If they're all the same lesson,
because
basically.
we never examine the truth experientially. We take the truth and we make dogma, ideology out of it. We become exclusive, and we become divisive and quarrelsome. Why? And we go to war.
Is it human nature?
It's unfortunately, it's the custodians of religion who become custodians because they want power. They want influence, they want control, they want even wealth. It all comes with being in charge of the religion. I like to think that God gave humans the truth, and then devil came and he said, "Let's organize it. We'll call it religion."
So religion, you feel, is not a good thing.
If it doesn't, if religion does not constantly engage in a self-examination of its tenets, it doesn't evolve, it dies. And that's what happens with religion when it is basically organized into rules of conduct which are controlled by a hierarchy. It's almost like a monarchy. It's not democratic at all. Spiritual experience is available to everyone. So the difference between religion and spirituality is, religion is when you take somebody else's belief and you say, "It must be true and I want that," but you don't have that yourself. Spirituality is when you have that experience yourself. It's more experiential.
You've written a book called The Third Jesus. And I think, first of all, going through the book, I think, this is a book that should be very important for people who are heartily Christian to read, to see what you have to say about it. But that the title itself would keep them from reading it, simply because it's saying the third Jesus.
Well, the first Jesus is historical. The Jesus that we read about in the four Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, also in the writings of St. Paul, a little bit we know of him from the Roman historian Josephus. But then we don't know too much more about him. Of the 33 years that he lived, 26 years are missing. So we know less than 20% of his actual life, which was short to begin with. There are other so-called apocryphal Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas, of Peter, of Mary Magdalene, something called the Gospel of Truth, which were discarded by the early church. The official canonization of the church, taking into, accepting Christianity, was in 382 AD under the Pope Damasus. And since then, lots of politics around the official doctrine, arguments about whether children are damned before they are baptized or not, and the meaning of the Eucharist and the sacrament. There are 30,000 denominations in Christianity right now. That's true of all other religions also, by the way. So, that's the second theological Jesus, who pronounces on everything from stem cell research to homosexuality to, abortion to birth control, things that Jesus never spoke about, to tell you the truth. And yet we use Jesus to pronounce on these things, and that Jesus influences our political agenda at the moment. It's doing that, and it will do that forever. The third Jesus is the mind, the consciousness, the spirit, that could say things like, the kingdom of heaven is within you. What did he mean? Or could say, I'm in this world and not of it. What did that mean? Or could say, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Or ask and you shall receive. Forgive trespasses, and so your trespasses will be forgiven.
Could you have
resist
written
not
the
evil.
third Buddha, the third Muhammad, too?
Yeah, sure.
In all of the religions?
Sure, absolutely.
Can we break from that, though?
We must, otherwise, this mystery that we call God could easily be saying the human species was an interesting experiment that didn't work.
Yeah.
Because in the name of religion, we've created wars. In our selfish nature and our exclusivity, we've destroyed the environment. We've caused the extinction of other species, and we're risking our own extinction. We need the next creative leap in our evolution right now.
Can we do anything as humans on this earth that truly can upset God, whatever God is?
No, we cannot. We are the becoming of God. So even the whole creative process and the whole destructive process, the divine, the diabolical, the sacred, the profane, the sinner, the saint, they're all different manifestations of God.
So how do we live, or better yet, why should we live a just life, a good life? To what
Because
benefit?
that is the nature of our evolution. Truth, goodness, harmony, beauty, these are evolutionary forces. And then there are other forces of destruction, separation, that are forces of inertia. And the two actually play with each other in order to cause creation. If you had only creative forces and no destructive forces, then this universe would rapidly expand into the heat death of absolute zero before you could say Hail Mary. If there were only destructive forces, the universe would collapse and disappear into a black hole before you could say Jesus Christ. So you need the play of opposing energies in order to have this mystery that we call creation. And yet it seems that the evolutionary forces are always ahead, and it's fun to be participating in those evolutionary forces. So, when Jesus says, resist not evil, I think what he's saying is that, evil is the projection of our collective shadow. Look within yourself. If you want to diminish the evil in the world, then don't judge even evil. He who is without sin, let him cast the first stone.
Thousands of years ago, we had the gods of ancient Rome and of Greece. And now we look at those and call them mythology. Thousands of years from now, will we look at this time and say what we had was mythology?
It's all mythology, and mythology is the truth, because history is unreliable. Joseph Campbell used to talk about this. He said, history is unreliable because it's a form of journalism. And, journalists don't report the truth. Journalists report their perspective of what is happening. What you read as history is actually the view of the person, the historian, rather than what actually happened. In India, we call the 1857, the War of Revolution. The British called it the British Mutiny, the Indian Mutiny. Depends on your perspective. But what is mythology? Mythology is our collective imagination. It's our collective longing. It's our collective desire for the highest good. It's our collective memory, and it's our collective consciousness. And it outlives history forever. So if you want to know the truth, the Roman gods and goddesses, these are symbolic expressions of our instinct to know ourselves and to know God. We can never know God, the infinite God, as a concept. So the best we can do is represent them in these mythical figures. And so that, in a sense, is our highest instinct to know ourselves and the mystery of our lives. And God is beyond mythology. God is beyond opposites. God is transcendent. God is beyond the opposing energies, and yet that which is differentiating into space-time, energy, information, matter, everything that we call reality, thoughts, feelings, emotions, environment, relationships, it's all a manifestation of that that intelligence, not even energy, that exists outside space-time.
And time has worked against us because we're out of it. So I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Deepak Chopra.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of Interviews, please visit HoustonPBS.org.